In this session, I'd like to return to our modal studies and look at combining the modes we've looked at so far. By doing this and looking at the chords that each mode creates, we can put together another very common chord sequence that appears in a wide variety of musical styles, something called the 1-6-2-5. So, briefly recapping, we've now looked at 4 of the 7 modes of the major scale. These are Ionian, Dorian, Mixolydian, and more recently, Aeolian or natural minor. Now, staying in the key of C major and looking at the chords that the chord tones of each mode create, we get the following associations. C Ionian creates a C major 7th, or the 1 chord. D Dorian creates a D minor 7th, or the 2 chord. G Mixolydian creates a G dominant 7th, or the 5 chord. And A Aeolian creates an A minor 7th chord, or the 6 chord. These 4 diatonic chord types can be rearranged by number to construct a chord sequence, hence the name 1-6-2-5. Similar to our 2-5-1 sequence, hear how the chords naturally cadence towards each other, creating a vamp that constantly cycles back around on itself. Due to this, it's quite common to find repeated 1-6-2-5 sequences used to make up parts or entire songs in all sorts of musical styles. Okay, here's the notation for our first exercise, and as you can see, it's in the key of C major. All it requires is for us to play up through an octave starting on the root note of each chord. So let's give it a try. After 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So following on from this exercise, let's try running each mode in reverse, starting from the octave and descending down to the root note. Ready? After 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the notation for our next exercise. As you can see from the chords, we've changed key here, from C major to D major. This change of key can also be noticed by the addition of these sharp cymbals onto the stave. Looking at these more closely, you can see that they sit on a line and in a space. This one on the line where you'd find the note of F, and this one in the space that you'd find the note of C. Basically, they tell the musician to sharpen every F and C that they encounter. Using key signatures help to unclutter the stave and in turn make the music easier to read. For example, here's our skipping in thirds exercise, written in C sharp major, which, as you can see, uses 7 sharps. I appreciate there's a lot to take in here in terms of remembering to sharpen the right notes, but notice how clear the stave is. I mean, here's the same exercise, but as you can see this time, I've written it in C major, which instead forces me to put all the accidentals onto the stave where needed, and makes it much, much harder to read. So going back to our next exercise, an easy rule of thumb to work out key signatures that use sharp notes on the stave is to just look at the last sharp symbol, which in this case is a C sharp, and move it up by a semitone. So moving up a semitone from C sharp, we find the note of D. And it's this note that's the root note or key of this piece of music. Simple. So let's give this 1-6-2-5 exercise in D major a try. At the heart of it is running the arpeggios of each chord in sequence. First, we play up through all the chord tones, the 1, 3, 5 and 7 of each chord, before descending back down through the chord tones, but starting from the octave. So to start with, we go up through a D major 7th arpeggio. Then switching to the octave, we play a descending D major arpeggio. Just remember to be aware of switching the type of arpeggio depending on the chord we're playing under. Okay, let's try it out. After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, staying with this idea, here's a bass line created using the chord tones of each chord in the sequence. Here's the notation. In this example, I've used a dotted crotchet followed by a quaver to create a strong rhythmic motif, and quite simply attached the pitches, which are basically chord tones, to the rhythm. Now, where this idea differs is how I've chosen to represent some of the chords. So far, as with most bass players, we've been used to representing chords from the root note up. So to get away from this, I've deliberately started the 6 and 5 chords from a high third. By doing this, as you can see from the notation, I've managed to give the line a nice shape so that it now rises and falls, with each bar and chord leading nicely into the next. Learning to voice any type of chord from any of its chord tones is something well worth practicing, as it'll open up new ways of spelling out the colour of a chord, giving you options that in turn can help any bass line or vamp sound less repetitive. So, let's try this idea out with the backing track. Ready? After 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hopefully during this session you've been able to really hear the sound of a 1-6-2-5 sequence and perhaps associate this with some of the countless songs that have been created using it. Something I suggest is to use the backing tracks at the end of the session to practice with and create some bass lines to support the chords. Also, don't forget to have a go at improvising over the vamps using modes or the corresponding pentatonic scales. In our next session, we'll be looking at the 3 remaining modes of the major scale. So, until then, be creative and enjoy making music. One, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4.